There is something so uniquely special about seasonal flowers. I know we tend to think about flowers and flower gardens as strictly a summer thing, but I truly believe that in nature, every month of the year, there is something beautiful that is blooming. Even though right now, as I'm filming this video, even though it's in the middle of winter and we sort of seem stuck in these gloomy, dull days, that doesn't mean that we can't enjoy fresh flowers. And one of my absolute favorite winter flowers is the Amaryllis. Today, I thought I'd share a bit more info on why I love Amaryllis so much, as well as share some tips and tricks to blooming Amaryllis in your own homes. So as always, if you're ready, let's go. As I said in the tulip video that I shared earlier this week, I was really drawn to Amaryllis because of the beautiful display they put on in my home during the winter months. And I would continue to grow Amaryllis bulbs, for their beauty alone. But my appreciation for these winter flowers has definitely deepened. Earlier this season, a friend of mine, she shared with me an inspiring story by Christy Nichols that was all about Amaryllis prayers. I'll link the entire story in the description box below so that you can understand it in more detail. But I found the symbolism behind Amaryllis to be really inspiring, and I love the Amaryllis flower even more for what it represents in regards to tough and hard seasons that are really just part of the human experience. As Christy shared in her story, and I do want to quote her here so that I get it right, she said, "The winter is beautiful under its blanket of white, but it is cold and harsh to the living thing determined to grow." Everyone knows that the season for blooming is in the warmth of the new spring. It takes great courage to grow and bloom in the bitterness of winter. But in the bleakness of winter, the Amaryllis will spring up, pushing through the soil, displaying the beauty it was created to share. The Amaryllis does not bloom because the conditions are perfect. The conditions are, in fact, counterintuitive to new life. But the Amaryllis blooms in winter even still. Okay, that's all totally unrelated to growing Amaryllis, but I wanted to share because I always think it's fun when we can find that emotional sort of connection to a specific variety of flower. And two, this is why I think Amaryllis bulbs can make such great gifts. They're beautiful, they're thoughtful, they just sort of check all the right boxes. So let's move on to the actual growing Amaryllis in your home. I will say that Amaryllis are one of the easiest bulbs to force. They only need bright light, some good soil, consistent water, and a warm room to really thrive in. If you're just getting started forcing bulbs yourself, I can't recommend enough that you start with an Amaryllis bulb. They're super forgiving, and often even with a little neglect, they will still bloom beautifully. When you're looking for Amaryllis bulbs to buy, here are some things you're going to want to look out for. The first being size. Amaryllis bulbs are sold according to the circumference of the bulb, and that measurement is usually given in centimeters. While all Amaryllis bulbs are beautiful, it can be to your advantage to buy larger bulbs. Understand that because all of the energy a bulb requires to flower is stored directly inside the bulb itself, a bigger bulb with more energy reserves will produce a bigger plant with a more impressive display of flowers. Now, especially since Amaryllis bulbs can be saved and rebloomed year after year, I personally think it's worth it to invest in a bigger Amaryllis bulb, even if it means that you have to spend a little bit more money. Now, let me show you the difference in bulb size with some Amaryllis bulbs that I happen to have on hand currently. This first bulb is a bulb that I bought at a local big box store. I was actually shopping for Christmas totes for my Christmas supplies after the holiday season. I happened to notice that the Amaryllis kits were on sale, and so I purchased this kit for just a couple of dollars so that I could really give you a visual of the difference in size. This bulb is on the smaller end, and I expect that once I pot it up, that it will give me 1, maybe 2 stems of flowers with likely 3 to 4 flowers per stem. Comparatively, this is a jumbo Amaryllis bulb that I bought directly from our wholesalers. This bulb is considered a jumbo bulb as it measures 34 to 36 centimeters. The largest Amaryllis bulbs that you can typically buy are going to be 36 to 38 centimeters. Now, this larger bulb will likely send up 3 to 4 stems throughout the season, and each stem will have as many as 4 to 6 flowers per stem. a significant difference from this smaller bulb. Comparing the two, this larger bulb is going to give you a showier display, but there is truly nothing wrong with this small bulb either. In fact, I sometimes like to mix and match different bulb sizes in a single container, as it helps create a stunning countertop display with lots of variety. While it's sometimes hard to predict how Mother Nature is going to work, as a general rule of thumb, here's sort of the rundown of what you can expect with all the different sized amaryllis bulbs. Your best bet for sourcing jumbo bulbs is likely your local greenhouse or nursery store. For retail customers, I have heard online that Longfield Gardens has a great selection. And I will say that if you're looking for amaryllis bulbs this coming year, check back with us here later towards the winter months, as we always carry jumbo amaryllis bulbs as part of our holiday shop. Some other things to note when buying bulbs. You'll sometimes, though not always, see a country of origin labeled somewhere on your bulb or bulb packaging, and this can often be an indicator of bloom time. Most often you'll find bulbs that are either from Peru in the southern hemisphere, or they are Dutch bulbs that originate from Holland. That country of origin can affect the bloom time of your amaryllis in its first year of growing, because remember, amaryllis are naturally warm season flowers, and in nature they tend to bloom in either the spring or the summertime. Well, when it's winter here in the northern hemisphere, it's actually summer in Peru. So that Peruvian amaryllis bulb that you receive around the holidays has been in holding and is naturally ready to bloom with the calendar. These southern hemisphere bulbs have a tendency to wake up and bloom much more quickly. For this reason, southern hemisphere bulbs are often called Christmas flowering bulbs, which simply highlights the fact that they're typically very easy to force in time for the holidays. Now again, when it's winter here in the northern hemisphere, it is also winter time in Holland. So Dutch bulbs tend to arrive to us dormant and require just a bit more time to wake up and bloom. If you pop your Dutch amaryllis bulbs early enough, you may still be able to force them in time for the holidays, but I much prefer to buy Dutch bulbs in more non-traditional holiday colors. Think whites, pinks, and even some soft peach varieties. These make for a great winter display even after the holidays are over. Generally speaking, your amaryllis bulb arrives ready to go. It's not going to need any special treatment. Unlike tulip bulbs that require a cold treatment, amaryllis are pretty straightforward, which is really what makes them perfect for anyone to grow. I do want to take a moment here, however, to sort of share an advanced tip with you. As I just said, your amaryllis bulb will not need any special preparation to grow. For years, I've simply planted my bulbs into a fresh pot of dirt once I received them. But in more recent years, as we begun to sell bulbs as part of our holiday market here at Two Sisters Flower Farm, I've made it a priority to do research so that we can make sure we're up to date with the best growing practices when it comes to amaryllis. Last year, I came across a study from Cornell University where the roots of amaryllis bulbs were soaked at room temperature between 68 and 70 degrees for 12 to 24 hours prior to planting. The idea behind this being that the soaking treatment will allow for easier rooting of the plant. The results of this study showed that this was indeed true. Compared to bulbs that were not soaked, the soaked bulbs resulted in faster, more vigorous and uniform growth. Additionally, the soaked amaryllis bulbs had stronger root systems that were better able to support the weight of the plant itself. I was surprised how well this little trick worked. We tried it out the tail end of last year with, again, some of the bulb gardens that we sold during our winter season. While this step is not necessary and your bulb will bloom regardless of whether you soak its roots or not, I thought this tip was so helpful that I wanted to pass it along to you guys. Now, to soak the roots, I just fill a large mason jar with warm water and allow the roots to submerge. The bulb fits nicely on top without being in the water. Now that you have your amaryllis bulb, it's time to pot it up. You can grow your amaryllis bulb in just about any container. It can be large or it can be small, with or without drainage holes, and you can even choose to grow your bulb with or without soil. The great thing about potting up amaryllis is that you can really make this project your own. One thing I will say, that amaryllis are one of the few bulbs that really don't mind being pot bound. So don't feel like just because you have a large bulb that you need a large container. Often the containers I use for my amaryllis are just 6 to 8 inches wide. The exception being containers like this, where I'm obviously blooming more than one bulb at a time. So here's the container that I will use for this video example. It is somewhat of a non-traditional container as it doesn't have any drainage holes. Now if you decide to use a container like I'm going to use today without drainage holes, I do recommend that you use activated carbon as you're potting up your bulb. This is something that I buy from my local pet store as it's commonly used in aquariums. But you can find it on Amazon, and I will link this in the description box below. But what this is just carbon in small pellet form that acts as a filter to minimize any odor that may result from not having drain holes within your pot. So I tend to sprinkle a little on the bottom of my container. And then I'm simply going to fill the container about halfway with moist potting soil. Any potting soil will do for this project. Just be certain that it's something that drains rather easily. Once I have my soil in place, I'm simply going to press my amaryllis bulb gently into the soil. Next, I'm going to add more soil on top to secure this bulb in place. I'm not going to cover the bulb entirely though. I will leave the top third of the bulb exposed. Finally, I'm going to give my bulb a good drink, but again, I want to emphasize that I'm not going crazy with water, because remember, my container, it doesn't have any drainage holes. I'm only going to use about a quarter or half cup of water to get this bulb good and settled in. At this point, you could really consider your amaryllis potted up, and it's ready to be placed in a warm location within your home so that it can begin the growing process. One thing that I always enjoy, however, is taking this potted amaryllis one step further and top dressing it to give this display some added flair. There's all sorts of decorations that you could use to top off your bulb. I'm going to use reindeer moss today because I just love that bright, vibrant color. You can easily find moss at your local craft store, but I'll link the one that I'm using in the description box below. Now, if you don't like the look of moss, you could decorate with pine cones or a mixture of fresh evergreens, or you can simply keep it as it is too. That's really an option. Now, like I said, once you're finished, you're going to want to make sure that you keep your amaryllis in a warm spot in your home. On your kitchen counter will work just fine, or on your mantle. Amaryllis are happiest in 70 to 80 degree temperatures. If your house is like mine and isn't that warm in the wintertime, consider placing your pot on top of a warm appliance. Like I said, maybe on top of a mantle or on top of a radiator or even by a sunny window. Over time, you'll start to see stems emerge from your amaryllis bulb. Now be patient, it can sometimes take a few weeks before the bulb begins to grow. You'll need to water your bulb as it works to produce flowers, but really it doesn't take much to keep your amaryllis happy. I recommend that you water only when the top inch of your soil is dry. Watering too often, especially early on when you have very little growth, that can cause your bulb to rot. Now for me, I'll usually stick my finger in the soil of my pot. If it's dry beyond my first knuckle, I'll give my amaryllis about a half cup or a cup of water. And that's honestly the extent of care needed to keep your amaryllis bulb alive and happy. Now we're going to let this amaryllis grow for a few more weeks, and then I'll come back here with another video showing you how to care for your amaryllis as it flowers. And don't worry, I'll also share with you everything that you need to know in order to save and rebloom your bulb next year. So again, you're going to want to stick around for that. In the meantime, I hope that you enjoy watching your amaryllis as it puts on growth. For me, bringing a bit of nature indoors, during the dull days of winter, well, that's one of my favorite ways to cozy up my home. Now before you go, if you could do me a favor real quick, and that's to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the content that I shared today. Also, if you haven't already, if you could hit that subscribe button below, that really does help us out and we'd appreciate it. Now thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye guys.